In the summer of 1518, people in Strasbourg began dancing. They didn't stop when they were injured. They didn't stop when others collapsed around them. And when the city intervened, more people died. This is the story of how one bad decision turned containment into contagion. It began without warning. In mid-July 1518, a woman stepped into the street in Strasbourg and began to dance. There was no music. That was the first thing people noticed. No fiddles, no drums, no singing from a nearby house. Just the sound of her shoes on stone. At first no one thought much of it. Most people treated it as strange, but not worth stopping for. She stayed longer than most people thought she would, long enough to be noticed. People passed her, then passed again. She was still there. At some point her husband intervened. Later records describe him begging her to stop, repeatedly. She didn't respond. If she ever paused, it wasn't long enough for anyone nearby to notice. The sources don't describe her laughing. They don't describe her crying. They don't describe her expression at all. What they describe is time. By evening, she'd not gone home. By the next morning, she was still there, still moving. Not with anyone, not for anyone, and not to anything anyone could hear. That was when the spectacle changed, because whatever this was, it was no longer looking voluntary, and still she kept moving, long enough to start breaking her own body. By the third day, the street no longer felt the same. Her feet were visibly swollen. Those close enough could see the skin split and darken. The movement hadn't stopped, but it had changed. Whatever rhythm it once had was gone. Steps dragged, turns faltered, and still she kept moving. That was when the line between watching and joining broke. One person stepped forward, jerking, twisting, not copying her, but not mocking her either. Then another, then another. Those who came to watch stayed longer than they meant to. They stood close, too close. Some swayed slightly, as if testing something, and then, without speaking, they too stepped forward and began to move. Strangely, unevenly, faces blank, eyes open. Standing nearby no longer meant staying out of it. No one cheered, no one laughed. As the dancing spread, the toll became visible. Broken skin, blisters, fractures, bodies being damaged without reacting as they should. Those who stood the longest were the next to move. Slowly they drifted from observers to dancers. This is the moment most retellings rush past, not the dancing, but the watching. Because by then what people were seeing no longer looked like something a person chose. At that point it could no longer be ignored. The dancing had spread from one body to an entire street. The city intervened. Physicians were consulted. Their judgment was careful and unanimous. This was an illness, a natural condition made worse by heat and by strain on the body. That diagnosis mattered. The council didn't know how to stop it, so they chose not to. Music was allowed, stages were constructed, musicians were paid from city funds. The intention was to let the illness exhaust itself. The thinking was cautious. If movement was involuntary, stopping it may do harm. But sound changed the street. Music filled the space around the dancers. cheerful, rhythmic, familiar, against faces that didn't change. What had been endurance now had structure. What had been suffering now looked ordered. Those who came to watch had something to move to, and once there was music, there was no longer a reason to stop. The city had meant to contain the illness. It had given it momentum. The dance had continued without regard for injury or exhaustion. Feet bloodied, bodies collapsed. Some didn't recover. The dancing didn't stop when bodies failed. It continued around them. Music did not stop the damage. It allowed it to continue. The city council hadn't regained control, so it adjusted. The afflicted were gathered and moved out of the streets, sent by cart towards a shrine associated with Saint Vitus, near Saverne. They were placed beneath a wooden image of the saint. Red shoes were fitted to their feet, crosses marked upon the sole. From here on, the city didn't decide, it deferred to a higher authority. Pilgrimage became treatment, distance became containment. What they did on the journey wasn't recorded. They disappeared from the record. And still the dancing spread. By early August, the tone hardened. What had been permission was now understood as a mistake. On the 2nd of August 1518, a formal prohibition was issued. Public dancing was banned. Certain instruments thought to increase its spread were forbidden. The order was signed. This was the city's quiet admission. What we tried first didn't work. Deferral had made no difference. Nothing calmed the illness. Every attempt had accelerated it. After the ban, the streets changed. Not immediately, not cleanly, but the gatherings thinned. The music stopped. The spaces emptied. Those still dancing were no longer watched. They were removed, or confined, or left behind. By late summer, the outbreak had burnt itself out. Not because it was understood, but because there was nowhere left for it to go. The restrictions were lifted, the streets returned to order. At its height, some chronicles stated as many as 15 people were dying each day. The dead were buried, the survivors went home. No explanation followed. Only the record remains. For weeks, an entire city watched people dance until their bodies failed, and only stopped once it understood it had helped it spread. It ended only when there was no one left to dance. The city had given the dancing structure so it wouldn't have to admit it was powerless to stop it. Today, we give things beyond our control labels for the same reason. 2 centuries later, another contagion appeared, but this was a different outbreak, investigated by the military, not dancing, but vampires. The vampire plague of 1732 is in the archive. I'm Nico, and I'll meet you there.